An investor's guide to Neurips. I attended the Neurips conference this year in New Orleans, and I want to use it as an example, as a case study for a broader theme, which is how to choose a topic and how to navigate a topic as an investor. The purpose of the Not Even Wrong podcast is to give people a sense for what it feels like to run a hedge fund. And I think I've tried to be very broad in the application of this purpose. I've spoken about particular investments. I've spoken about returns. I've spoken about how to deal with investors, how to deal with portfolio companies, how to deal with the macro. I think the beauty of the hedge fund business is that it's really versatile. It gives you a lot of different looks at the world, but that's also the problem here. I think it's very broad, and I think knowing how to navigate this very broad action space, I would say, is half the battle already. So for people who are interested in how to choose a topic and how to navigate a chosen topic, I'm going to use Neurips and artificial intelligence because that's what we're doing right now. This is not investment advice, so by no means take this as an nudge towards going into that field. If you're interested in consumer goods, if you're interested in oil, if you're interested in climate change, whatever your theme is, I think you can still take away some interesting clues, hopefully, from this episode, because it's theme unrelated, right? What I'm going to talk about is how we navigate the artificial intelligence space. I'm going to use Neurips as an example of a large conference, which I think was the most important conference I attended this year. So, but you can easily extrapolate that to other conferences in other fields. Again, this is not investment advice. Please do your own work. The purpose of this podcast series is to give people a sense of what it feels like to run a hedge fund. It has nothing to do with our own hedge fund. And if you're interested in our hedge fund, please use other channels to educate yourself about Orange Capital Partners, not this one. This is a Not Even Wrong podcast. It's December 27, 2023. This is Krim Delco. For today, the fund is up 4.2%, and the market is flat. For the year, we are up 128.6%. The market is up 24.4%. We're outperforming by 104.2%. So an investor's guide to Neurips. Again, it's meant to help people navigate a space in general. And I'm going to do three things here. I'm going to talk about what themes to choose to even work on as a hedge fund. And then once you've chosen that, how to navigate, this is going to be in particular, let's say in our case, how we navigate Neurips and other conferences like that. And then third, also very important, I think the three really most important things, again, which theme to choose, what to invest in, and third is what criteria to use to decide whether you're right or wrong, and when to get in, when to get out, and so on and so forth. Those are the really important three aspects of any hedge fund. So let's start with the theme, right? Picking a theme is like when you do a PhD, you're going to have to pick a theme. When you go to the bookstore, you're going to have to pick a theme. In other words, you have to buy a book, right? You're going to spend maybe a lot of hours reading that book. When you go to college, you pick a theme. I would say when you marry a partner, you pick a theme, right? It's a life that you're going to share. It's a certain exposure you're going to have. So in many ways, we are always in this position. So in that sense, hedge funds are not very different than other things in life. But I think it's more important here because if you're an aerospace engineer at Boeing, your action space is relatively narrow. I think you're not going to think about, neural architectures of the brain. You're not going to think about, generalization of statistics or things like along those lines. You might, I'm not sure. I would say your action space is fairly limited because your job is to design, build airplanes, and you can, if you work for Coca-Cola, again, your action space is fairly limited. I would say that picking a theme as a hedge fund manager is much broader because you have this very broad action space. Wall Street has found ways to deal with that. There's sector specialists, there's geography specialists. In Europe, the market's organized by geography. In the US, by sector. The idea is the same. It's narrow the action space. For example, in Latin America, or in there's people that invest in emerging markets, so they're neither nation specific nor sector specific. They are emerging market specific. So there's a lot of these some classifications, some better, some worse. We at Orange Capital Partners have chosen the theme of artificial intelligence applied to the real world. So this is the theme that we are looking at. This is the space that we are sort of constraining ourselves with, but also giving ourselves the focus to, right? So it's always for people, let's say for PhDs, I'm pretty sure they know what I'm talking about here, that once you choose a topic, let's say if you're interested in the statistical intricacies of machine learning models, then you're going to have a more limited action space within AI. Other people might choose how to apply transformer architectures to robots. Other people might choose more theoretical themes, such as, excuse me, let's say, what are sort of the limits of algorithmic decision making, or I don't know, things like that. So you can limit your space. You always you have to limit your space, right? You have to. I mean, you're human. You have a limited capacity to absorb information and all that. So how to choose that? Now the question. Okay, number one. Okay, big question. What theme should I choose? I think I would say you could choose a Venn diagram, but let's kind of keep it more general. I think number one, you want to use something that interests you. It's very important. Number two, you want to use something that you're good at, or that you have a chance to be good at. And number three, you want to use also something where, for lack of a better word, there's something going on, right? What I mean with that is, let's say, let's choose an example, nuclear power. I could be wrong about that, but a couple of years ago, nuclear power there wasn't much going on in nuclear power. And whether you're interested or not, whether you're good at it or not, really doesn't matter. If the field is not moving forward, if there isn't enough new concepts and engineering practices to wrap your arms around, to have views about, to invest capital to, if entrepreneurs are not interested in starting companies within the field because the field is static, well, what's your purpose as a hedge fund manager, and why are you invested? So there has to be something going on. Now, we've actually talked about this in the past when we spoke about disruption. I'm not going to rehash that, go back, I think it's about 2 years ago. But in general, the way we think about interesting fields is there has to be iteration, low cost error correction, and low-cost error making. So those are, excuse me for the generalization, but just bear with me here. Think about it. Like, if your field is X, whatever that field is there a lot of iteration? Meaning, are people trying new things in that field? And the function that they usually are exposed to when they're thinking of trying new things is, how costly is it for me to make a mistake? And how costly is it for me to correct errors? If the costs of error correction are low and the cost of making mistakes are low, you will have a tendency in the field to iterate. Now, of course, we can have a paperclip economy. In other words, we can iterate about things which aren't maybe as interesting. And in my opinion, there's a lot of things like that. For example, there's a lot of iteration in social media, for example, whether it's TikTok or Instagram and so on and so forth. And in my opinion, those are not very interesting fields in terms of investing, because the monetization of these things is very difficult. So you need a little bit more than just iteration. There's a lot of iteration in how to package Coca-Cola products. There's a lot of iteration in consumer goods. There's a lot of creams coming out for anti-aging. There's a lot of stuff going on in many fields. So this is not, but what I'm trying to say here is it's not enough just to have a field where there's a lot of iteration, but it's definitely a necessary condition. Because like nuclear power, where there isn't much iteration, by the way, not because the people are lazy in the field or anything like that, it's just because the errors are very costly and it's very difficult to correct errors. So when you're in a field like that, I would stay away. This is the way we think about it. So we like fields where there's a lot of iteration and where we can have low cost of error correction. And now you might say our choice at Orange Capital Partners, which again is applying artificial intelligence to the real world. So what we're trying to do is bridge the gap that Peter Thiel is complaining about, which is we want to bring Moore's law to atoms. We want to revolutionize the world of atoms through the work that can be done and is being done within the world of bits. And there is many ways to do that. Quantum computing is one, artificial intelligence is one. There is, I would say, a lot of hybrids, which are very interesting. For example, computational material science, computational engineering, computational, you name it. So meaning applying AI to fields in atoms. We believe that, for example, material science can have big leaps forward just because, again, think about it. You can iterate much faster with AI. But one of the biggest advances of computation is that you can iterate faster at lower cost. You can try a lot of different materials. You can test, let's say, Coulomb efficiency of different elements, and then come up with some interesting candidates to do real research in the real lab, and then maybe come up with a much better battery for the future. Those are the kinds of ideas we're bouncing around. But again, we at Orange Capital Partners, we're interested in applying AI to the real world. To finish that first point, so what field should I use? A field that I'm interested in, a field that I can be good at, and also a field that has some characteristics of a disruptive field. So there has to be iteration, there has to be low cost of error correction, there has to be low cost of errors, and some, you need to finally maybe put the icing on the cake. You need entrepreneurs, good entrepreneurs like artists and athletes. They don't come in hordes of talent, but every now and then there is a generational talent, and then you better be ready when that happens. So this brings me to the next point, which is, okay, once you've chosen a field, how to navigate the field. And this is really the title of the episode, an investor's guide to Neurips. So let's take Neurips as an example, or let's take AI in general as an example, and then hopefully you can learn a couple of general ideas of how to navigate a space. So in our case, what we're doing at Orange Capital Partners is we're really focused on the science and the application of the science to the real world. So that's sort of those are the vectors that we're looking at. You could be looking at other things. For example, you could be looking at what venture capital is doing. You could be trying to follow some of the large VCs. You could be looking at what Wall Street is doing. You could be looking at what large companies are doing. But you could be following corporate VCs. You could be looking at what media is talking about. So there's many fields that, or many vectors or spaces that you could be spending your time with and trying to understand how those spaces are dealing with your theme. In our case, we're focusing on where science is overlapping into technology. So in other words, when we're not scientific in a sense that we would go to a conference, even in Neurips, and listen to the really hardcore scientific talks. That's not our game. Doesn't mean it's bad or anything like that. We believe very strongly that science lives off serendipity. Science lives off, things like coincidence and like I said, serendipity. So we need to have a lot of people talking to each other and doing a lot of things, and then every now and then something pops out. Now maybe we can streamline that process. This goes back to our previous episode from today. We believe there's not enough progress in science, which has to do with the incentive structure and the fiat money and the government involvement, but that's not topic of this episode. What we're saying is, look, we're going to take science as it is, and we're going to look for the overlaps. So as far as Neurips is concerned, for example, we really focused on some of the papers that came out, for example, the Chris Ree presentation and the and the papers around that. So the Mamba, which is the models that excuse me, let me backtrack a bit. So what I'm trying to say here is one of the, we believe the most important presentation in our first discussion in the Neurips conversation was about Chris Ree's presentation. Why? Because Chris Ree brought up some ideas and concepts of how to more efficiently compute what needs to be computed within the transformer architectures. There's also some ideas, again, out of that realm of people. So it's not just Chris Ree. He's just sort of my memorization stick, if you want, or whatever the word is. Like I remember it with his name, but there's other people. Albert Gao is one of them, and many other people involved. Stefano Hermon. The idea is, okay, what's the difference between a transformer architecture and a state space model in terms of the math underlying it and in terms of the engineering underlying it and the actual computations that happen. And at the margin, those things can be very similar. So those are the kind of things that we are interested in, because we believe that understanding the fundamentals from that perspective will help us understand later on which companies are doing on the right path and which companies might not be on the right path when it comes to applying AI to the real world. So for example, we are very, very excited about some of the papers that were presented in Neurips. For example, the chain of thought paper, the tree of thought paper, where the idea of localization as sort of why does chain of thought even work in transformers. So things along those lines really made us reiterate our thesis that the data that you actually have is as important as the model and the architecture. So one of the big takeaways from Neurips for us this year was that the central dogma of machine learning, which is data, model, algorithm, is absolutely can be reversed. In other words, each one of those elements is key, and you can iterate around all of them, not just around models and algorithms. This is really important. And some of the papers that we looked at, read, studied, spoke to people with, all of that stuff are in that field. So why does chain of thought work? Well, it might work because there is some local data and data in the training. When we train models, we train them sort of localized, but then we have connections between those local areas of knowledge, and that's the chain of thought. Then there's some ideas that came out of the tree of thought idea or paper, where you have a search over the tree of thoughts, tree of concepts, or whatever you want to use, and then you find faster solutions. There's papers around why chain of thought works is because transformers have the ability to pick the right algorithms when they're exposed to a task. That's what zero-shot learning does. So if I expose my my transformer with a prompt that has sort of logit type data, so 0-1 binary type data, the transformer will automatically find assume a logic regression type algorithm to solve the problem. And if it's a continuous time exposure, it will use more some least square error method. So choice of algorithms within the transformer as part of the ability of the transformer to solve problems. We've spoken also already, we've discussed all the deep mind work, the self-referential, self-improvement stuff. What transformers seem to be really, really good at is plan semantically how to tackle a problem and then solve the problem. And that's fundamental. Understanding that from a scientific perspective, understanding that from an engineering perspective, that goes, that's the Chris Ree stuff, flash attention. How can we do this massive computations maybe more efficiently on a GPU? That's really key. Now, our investments are in companies like Tesla and NVIDIA, right? So how does that all relate to this? Well, we are interested in how transformer architectures can translate into robotics, if at all, because they're so successful in this space, in the sort of chatbot area. And by the way, that's not really what they're good at. What they're really, really good at is planning and sort of more like an operating system type. And that to me is really, really key. We believe that we can have applications in robotics that leverage transformers. We can have four-dimensional transformers that take X, Y, Z, and T. And by the way, X-dimensional transformers. So if you take it robotics, you have a lot more than just 4 dimensions. You have X, Y, and Z. So where is it going? X, Y, and Z in the 3-dimensional space. T is the time. And then you also have, let's say, rotational positioning of the arms and legs and things like that. So you could have up to dozens of dimensions. Once you have transformers and tokenizations, and in that type of dimensional world, then the computations become really, really interesting, and maybe applying state space type models it could be more interesting. So that's sort of where we live. And just to finish that part of the conversation, now when we navigate something like Neurips and we go through hundreds and hundreds of papers, thousands of people, it's good to have that in mind. It's good to have that in mind. Okay, how do transformers apply to robotics? What is the fundamental idea behind transformers? How does the architecture work? Why does chain of thought work? Why does tree of thought work? What is that? Like, those types of questions are helpful when you are at a conference like that. So whether it's Neurips or some other conference that you're going, try to have a big picture idea of what you're interested in, what really sparks your interest, and then you will find it. By the way, when I was at Neurips, I attended a workshop which was about applying AI to science, which is something I'm very, very excited about. But I feel like the field is just not really going anywhere. It's not interesting to me for various reasons. Again, this is not part of this episode, so I don't want to go deeper. So but I didn't waste my time. I spent maybe an hour and a half, and that was it. I left. There was this whole chain of thought, cognitive approaches towards computer science and in general AI. Wasn't exactly on my radar, but then I went and saw a couple of presentations and I was really excited. So another helpful question when you go to a conference like Neurips is, okay, what kind of algorithm do I use to even navigate, right? For example, do I just go with the most famous professors? Whenever they are in a workshop or when they are giving a presentation, just go with, so algorithm would be famous people, like keyword search. If Percy Liang is famous, he's at Stanford, just go and listen. That's, go to whatever comes out of CMU, Berkeley, MIT, Polytech Zurich. That's about it, maybe a few more. And the rest don't even bother, right? You could do that. Obviously, it's discriminating, but you have to, you can't be at 5 places at the same time. You can follow what Neurips has given you, which is they have their best paper awards, they have the orals. So Neurips has a hierarchy of papers and hierarchy of people and so on and so forth. So you can follow that. To some extent, that's what I did, because I went to the orals, which is already a pre-selection, right? These orals are pre-selected from all the papers. And then I would say you can do a bit of random search too. That's what I did too. I just walk around, just randomly pick, oh, maybe this is interesting, maybe that. Now, I still, when I go randomly, I still have some big picture ideas, right? I'm not going to waste my time with, for example, genomics, drug discovery, not of my interest. Not because it's bad or anything like that. It's just I can't get involved in that too, right? That's probably 30% of Neurips was all about drug discovery and genomics. That's just not my field. Again, for reasons that I'm happy to discuss in another episode. Self-driving cars, navigation, mapping, very interested. Anything that I saw. That's why, for example, we also discussed one of the papers that came out of NVIDIA where they use transformer architecture for traffic prediction. So again, if you have a big picture idea and some even maybe more granular decision-making criteria, it will be very helpful, even if you do random searches, right? So how to navigate a conference like Neurips, have a big picture idea of what you want to do. Go there, have your own algorithm in terms of what you want to focus on, some of the professors that you're interested in, some of the grad people maybe that some of the papers you already read. You know, even people like Yanni Kilcher, I mean, you know, he's a famous YouTuber, but if he has a paper, which was the case, why don't you spend some time? Turned out to be really interesting what they did with Open Assistant. So, you know, famous people, whatever it is, have some criteria. Don't just go there and walk from room to room. Should you spend time on workshops versus open talks versus, invited talks versus just poster session orals? My recommendation would be follow the program. These people have put some thought in it. I know the general idea is don't waste your time with invited talks. They're a waste of time. I don't think so. I think Chris Ree's talk was phenomenal. Susan Murphy's talk was good. It wasn't my field, but it's interesting. But yeah, some of the talks weren't. The panel on scaling, I think, was it? Yeah, beyond scaling. Sasha Rosh was the panel presenter. Young was there. Others. It was fine. I think that was definitely worth my time. So no, I think the panels and the open invite, follow the program. Like, people have put some thought in this, right? Now, there's plenty of time for socializing, for going around. Like, you don't need to cut that too, right? There's, I think, about 4 hours of presentation per day. There's another easy, I mean, you can have a 12-hour day in a conference like that. There's 8 hours left for all kinds of other things. So do that. Now, on the socializing part, I think that's a personal thing. I am not the small talk type. I don't particularly enjoy going to after parties and things like that because I'm not good at it. I'm really not good at it. I get bored very fast. I can't small talk. I'm not in. Even if I know, if I'm knowledgeable about the inside gossip, I don't like to share it. It's just me, right? I like to keep it formal. Talk about your poster, talk about maybe your career, talk about your aspirations in the field, things like that. I like to do. I did some of that. So it doesn't just have to be about your paper, but I really don't care whether you like CMU and whether Harvard is better, or, you know, whatever gossip, or even like other stuff, or what your latest girlfriend was, or something like that, or boyfriend. I don't care, right? I don't want to know about this. Actually, I was lucky enough that my partner joined me for the conference, and not all of the days, but some of the days. So after you know, about 7-8 p.m., I was happy to go back, have a nice dinner with her, spend some time, enjoy New Orleans. Like, I'm okay with that. So that's me. Other people, they need to spend every minute of every hour of the day socializing. I understand that. Again, that's personal, but I think it's important to spend time off the invited talk track and the workshop track, of course. And that's what I was trying to say. So again, how to navigate something like Neurips? Have a big picture idea, have your criteria, have your algorithm, and then, you know, leave some leeway for flexibility, of course. Now, lastly, as an investor, of course, you have to make a choice. Now, where do I put my money to work? And this is the most important, of course, of all of them. And how do I choose when I'm right and wrong? Those are things that actually warrant a whole new episode. I just want to keep it very concise here. Stick with entrepreneurs, stick with people that have skin in the game. Just one example, that's why I don't like biotech. Most biotech companies, there's no skin in the game there. The founders are usually professors. They are on the board, maybe advisory board. They're not even CEO. And then the CEOs are like McKinsey types. Nothing wrong with that. It's just nobody has skin in the game. Usually doesn't work out well. Every now and then it works out, but it's not the kind of wealth creation that we're looking for. We're looking for the kind of wealth creation that gets you to the, you know, $1 trillion company. For that, you need people like Musk, like Zuckerberg, like Bezos, people who are in it for real. So that's one criteria. I think you want to have the transferability of technology. So quantum computing is a good example where the transferability is just not there yet. Although I think there's a bit of a chicken and egg problem. Usually when you have people like Musk or Bezos in a field, the transferability all of a sudden becomes very real. Look at aerospace and SpaceX. Without Musk, we would still be blowing up rockets after every launch, and now we're not. So I think science and technology is often also provoked and driven by entrepreneurs. So look for something like that. invest, like we said many times, we really only have one degree of freedom once we're invested, which is stay in there. Don't sell. Selling is, of course, you sell when you're wrong. How do you know when you're wrong? Well, a lot of criteria, but in general, you want to stay invested for the rest of your life, because the company that you chose is the kind of company that will generate massive amounts of wealth, and there's never a good time to sell. This is a general comment. Of course, it depends, and even we had to sell sometimes, but it's usually because of leverage, not because we don't like the company. So you want to try to find such companies. This is the way we operate. Of course, again, this is not investment advice. Do your own work, do your own thing. This is just, we try to give a sense for how the inner workings of Orange Capital Partners are geared towards what and how what we pay attention to. Hopefully it's helpful for people. Some of it, put it in the comments. So to summarize, the three big questions as a person in the hedge fund business: number one, what team should I work on? Number two, what companies should I invest in? Number three, how should I invest, how much, and when do I know I'm right and wrong? We focused on the second here. So once we have a theme, how do we navigate the theme? We use Neurips as an example. And I think fundamentally what you want to do is you want to find a place where there's enough action, usually entrepreneurs interested in that space, real entrepreneurs, and also fields that you're interested in, and fields also where you can actually have some contribution. Thank you.